December 11th, 2010. The Orpheum Theater in Los Angeles. BET's 11th annual celebration of gospel is being taped. The cream of gospel talent is there. Chaka Khan, Kirk Franklin, and Whitney Houston's dear friend, gospel powerhouse Kim Burrell. But nobody in that audience knows what's about to happen. Nobody knows they're about to witness something that will haunt them for the rest of their lives. Because what happens in the next few minutes will become Whitney Houston's final televised performance before her death 14 months later. And the song she's about to sing, it was written for her 14 years earlier, but she never knew it existed. This is the story of a surprise that broke an entire room into tears, a friendship forged in prayer and pain, and a moment so powerful that even Whitney herself would call her friend the very next day to say, "Kim, I needed to do that." By the end of this video, you'll understand why this performance, more than any stadium, any award show, any chart-topping hit, was the one Whitney Houston needed most. Like this video if you love Whitney Houston, and subscribe because we're diving deep into stories you've never heard before. To understand what happened that December night, you need to understand what Whitney had been through in the months leading up to it. The Nothing But Love World Tour, a disaster, February 6th, 2010. Seoul, South Korea. Whitney Houston stepped onto a stage for the first time in over a decade. Her comeback album, I Look to You, had debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 just months earlier, selling 305,000 copies in its first week, her best first-week sales ever. The critics loved it, fans loved it. Whitney was back, or so everyone thought. The Nothing But Love World Tour was supposed to be her triumphant return. Instead, it became a nightmare that would follow her to the grave. February 22nd, 2010. Brisbane, Australia. Opening night of the Australian leg. The Brisbane Entertainment Centre. Fans who had waited over a decade to see The Voice live were about to be devastated. Whitney's voice was hoarse, weak. She coughed between songs. And then came the moment that made headlines around the world. In the middle of performing I Will Always Love You, the song that defined her career, Whitney paused for several minutes to sip water. The crowd didn't know what to do. Some waited. Some booed. Some just left. Kathy McCabe from the Daily Telegraph wrote, "Her acoustic set of old favorites unfortunately could not hide the very obvious problems with her voice." By the time she got to the gospel section of the show, a steady stream of disappointed, saddened, and angry fans started streaming out the doors. Whitney's promoter tried to defend her. It is what it is. She's comfortable with the show she's performing. She knows she's not hitting every note like she used to, but it's value for money. It's Whitney Houston, warts and all. Warts and all. That's what it had come to. The criticism spreads like wildfire. April 13th, 2010, Birmingham, England. The Sun labeled the show a persistent problem. April 20th, 2010, Dublin, Ireland. John Maher from The Independent wrote that Whitney spent more time chatting with the audience than singing, and that her backing vocalists were carrying the show. April 26th, 2010. The O2 Arena, London. Whitney apologized to a sold-out crowd for her voice's poor quality, blaming the air conditioning for exacerbating respiratory issues. She faltered on the high notes in I Will Always Love You and The Greatest Love of All. The Guardian called the climax unspectacular. Show after show after show. The reviews were brutal. The headlines were merciless. The truth behind the struggle. Here's what the public didn't know. Whitney's vocal coach, Gary Katona, had been working with her intensively since 2007. Through targeted 30-minute sessions emphasizing breath control and resonance, he'd helped her regain approximately 75 to 80% of her peak vocal capacity. But there was one problem Whitney couldn't seem to fix. She wouldn't quit smoking. And every cigarette was another nail in the coffin of the voice that had once moved millions. The tour ended on June 17, 2010, at Manchester Arena. Whitney had performed 46 shows across Asia, Australia, and Europe, but notably skipped the United States entirely. Why? Insiders whispered that it had been decided to shield her from the glare of American media. If the plan was to avoid attention, it failed spectacularly. The tour grossed $36 million worldwide, making it the 34th highest-earning tour of 2010. But the cost to Whitney's spirit? Incalculable. Mark Bigo wrote in his biography, "In terms of artistic success, her Nothing But Love World Tour was a complete train wreck. Countless thousands of fans walked out on her concerts, bitterly disappointed by what they witnessed." By December 2010, Whitney was broken. The world had told her she was finished, that her voice was gone, that she should just retire and disappear. And then came the phone call that would change everything. Her name was Kim Burrell. And if you didn't know her before Whitney died, you need to understand who she was and what she meant to Whitney in those final darkest years. Who was Kim Burrell? Kim Burrell wasn't just any gospel singer. She was a legend in the gospel world, known for her jazzy style, complex runs, and a voice that could move even the most hardened soul. She was also a pastor at the Love and Liberty Fellowship Church in Houston, Texas. But to Whitney Houston, she was something far more important. Her spiritual counselor, her prayer partner, her sister. How their friendship began. Kim Burrell entered Whitney Houston's life when Whitney entered rehab. The exact year isn't publicly known, but what is known is this. When Whitney was at her lowest, struggling with addiction, broken by her marriage to Bobby Brown, Kim Burrell became the person she called every single day. Kim later told KHOU in Houston, "I became Whitney's spiritual counselor, talking with Whitney nearly every day." They didn't just pray together occasionally. They prayed together in person over the phone, whenever Whitney needed help. And Whitney wasn't shy about needing help. Kim told CNN's Kyra Phillips, "Whenever she called, I was there." There was one tour stop during Whitney's Nothing But Love World Tour where Kim flew all the way to Germany, not to perform, not for business, but just to be there in prayer for Whitney. Just to be there. That's the kind of friendship they had. February 2010. BET Honors. Before the disaster that was the Nothing But Love Tour, there was a moment of pure joy. At the 2010 BET Honors in February, Kim Burrell stood on that stage and performed I Believe in You and Me as a tribute to Whitney Houston. Video footage shows Whitney in the audience, jumping out of her seat in surprise and glee when Kim was introduced. She stayed at the edge of the stage the entire time, shouting encouragement, repeating certain parts. "Sisters!" Whitney kept shouting. "Sisters!" That's what they were. Sisters in every way that mattered. The song that connected them, I Look to You. The title track of Whitney's 2009 comeback album wasn't just another pop song. It was a prayer. The song had been written by R. Kelly back in 1996, 14 years before Whitney finally recorded it. In 1996, Whitney was working on The Preacher's Wife soundtrack, which was mostly gospel music. R. Kelly tried to send I Look to You directly to Arista's office in Manhattan for Whitney to record. But Clive Davis held on to the song for 12 years. When Whitney started looking for music to record in 2008 for her comeback album, the song was finally presented to her. Whitney told Oprah Winfrey, "When I heard the lyrics spiritually, it connected with me very much." She explained what the song meant. "This is all about where I look to, how I got over, how I made it through some of the rough times." When Oprah asked if she was singing about something greater than herself, Whitney replied without hesitation, "Greater than me, far greater than me, absolutely. Somebody bigger than you and I." The song became the essence of the entire album. A declaration that no matter how far she'd fallen, no matter how broken she'd become, she knew where to turn. She looked to God, and she looked to friends like Kim Burrell, who reminded her that God was still there. The last voicemail. On Saturday, February 11th, 2012, the day Whitney died, Kim Burrell received a voicemail from Whitney. In the background, gospel music was playing. Whitney sounded happy. She was singing. The message was simple. She couldn't wait to see Kim. Kim later told Sean and Dean. She was in great spirits. She was singing. I was on my way to see her and I ended up going to the hotel, but I was a little too late. Kim has that voicemail still. It may be the last call Whitney ever made. Whitney's family asked Kim to keep it private, and Kim said she plans to keep it forever. Hit the like button if you're moved by this friendship. And stay with me, because what happens next will absolutely wreck you. The Orpheum Theater, Los Angeles. BIT's 11th annual celebration of gospel is being taped. It won't air until January 30th, 2011. But tonight, the biggest names in gospel music are gathered. Kim Burrell is scheduled to perform. She's going to sing I Look to You, Whitney's song, the title track from Whitney's comeback album. But here's what nobody in that audience knows. Whitney Houston is in the building. The plan. This wasn't some last-minute decision. This was planned in secret. Whitney was going to hide behind a curtain while Kim started the song. And then, at the second verse, Whitney's voice would come through the speakers. Only then would the curtain rise to reveal the woman the entire world had been writing off as finished. Kim Burrell would later say she considered Whitney as a sister. And this performance, it was going to be their moment. The performance begins. The lights dim. Kim Burrell steps onto the stage alone. She begins singing, As I lay me down, heaven, hear me now, I'm lost without a cause, after giving it my all. Her voice is flawless, powerful, every run, every note. Perfection, the audience is mesmerized. This is why Kim Burrell is a legend. But then, something changes. At the start of the second verse, a new voice comes through the speakers. It's unmistakable. Even after all the criticism, all the bad reviews, all the talk about her voice being gone, that voice is still unmistakable. After losing my breath, there's no more fighting left. The audience freezes. Wait, is that? And then the curtain rises. The reveal, Whitney Houston walks out. The audience erupts. People are screaming, crying, jumping to their feet. Nobody expected this. Not one single person in that room knew Whitney Houston was going to be there. And Whitney? She's walking toward Kim Burrell with her voice soaring. The two women embrace. They're singing together now, their voices intertwining, like they've been doing this their whole lives. I look to you, I look to you. When all my strength is gone, in you I can be strong. What made this performance different? Reports from people who were there said Whitney was in top shape physically and vocally. She was remarkably sweat-free. None of the strain and exhaustion that had plagued her tour performances. Multiple sources described it as the best she has genuinely sounded in years. But it wasn't just about the vocals. It was about what was happening between the two women on that stage. Throughout the duet, Whitney and Kim ad-libbed about their deep bond, about the struggles they'd helped each other face. Kim later said, it was the kind of support that Houston clearly needed after the negative reaction to her recent tour. And the audience? They never sat down, not once. They stayed on their feet the entire time, whooping and hollering every time Whitney improvised with her vocal harmonics, the extended encore. The song should have ended after about 4 minutes, but Whitney and Kim kept going. And going. They were feeding off the energy in that room, off each other, all the pain from the tour, all the headlines, all the doubt. In that moment, none of it mattered. Whitney was doing what she was born to do, and she was doing it with someone who loved her for who she was, not what she could do for them. When it finally ended, the audience was in tears. They had just witnessed something sacred, the phone call. That night, after the taping, Whitney called Kim. Kim later told CNN what Whitney said. "Kim, I needed to do that. It felt good, and I thank God that we had an opportunity to do it together. I needed to do that. After months of being torn apart by critics, after walking off stages to boos and jeers, after watching fans stream out of arenas in disappointment, Whitney needed this. She needed to stand on a stage with someone who believed in her, someone who saw her as more than the voice, someone who prayed with her, cried with her, held her up when she couldn't stand on her own. She needed gospel. She needed God. She needed her sister. And for one perfect night, she had it all." Comment below if this story moved you. And subscribe. We're not done yet. The final televised performance. What nobody in that audience knew on December 11th, 2010 was that they had just witnessed Whitney Houston's final televised performance. The show aired on January 30th, 2011. 14 months later, on February 11th, 2012, Whitney Houston was found dead in a bathtub at the Beverly Hilton Hotel. That performance with Kim Burrell? It was the last time the world would see Whitney Houston perform on television. What Kim Burrell knew in the days after Whitney's death, Kim Burrell gave several interviews. She told KHOU in Houston, "There are days I feel regretful that I wasn't there. There are days I feel like, how could you? And then there are days I feel like, yes, no more trouble." She became emotional as she reflected on Whitney. "Because I know she didn't want me to feel the pain I feel about her. But it is what it is." Kim also revealed something heartbreaking. She and Whitney were supposed to go to Clive Davis's annual pre-Grammy party together on February 11th, 2012, the night before the Grammy Awards. Kim was nominated for Gospel Album of the Year. They had plans. Kim later admitted, "I'm going to be honest with you. My reason for going with Whitney was to make sure she didn't get into any trouble. But those plans never materialized." Kim said, "I was on my way to see her, and I ended up going to the hotel, but I was a little too late." A little too late. The funeral, on February 18th, 2012, at New Hope Baptist Church in Newark, New Jersey, Whitney Houston's homegoing service was held. R. Kelly, the man who wrote "I Look to You" back in 1996, stood at the pulpit and sang the song that had become Whitney's spiritual anthem. The service was broadcast and streamed live to a worldwide audience. Millions watched as gospel legends, family members, and close friends paid tribute to the woman who had moved the world with her voice. Kim Burrell was there. Some criticized her later, saying she should have sung the song the family asked her to sing at the funeral. But those who knew the depth of her friendship with Whitney understood. Kim was grieving. She had lost her sister. The promise. In December 2024, just weeks ago, Kim Burrell revealed something that shocked Whitney's fans. She announced that she's writing a memoir titled "Whitney and Me." Kim explained that she and Whitney had made a promise to each other before Whitney's death. They would refrain from disclosing certain intimate details of their friendship and experiences in published works until the time was right. Now, 12 years after Whitney's death, Kim feels ready to honor that commitment. "I am finally getting that out," Kim told Fox 5 DC. "It is so hard to talk about, especially now that we just funeralized her mother." Cissy Houston, Whitney's mother, passed away in October 2024 at age 91. Kim said of Whitney, "I miss her so very much, especially during the holidays." An official release date for Whitney and Me hasn't been confirmed yet, but when it comes out, it will be the first time the world hears the full story of what these two women meant to each other. Why this performance mattered. December 11th, 2010, wasn't Whitney's biggest stage. It wasn't her highest profile appearance. It didn't break any records. But it was the performance she needed. After months of being told she was finished, that her voice was gone, that she should just give up, Whitney stood on a gospel stage with her spiritual sister and reminded everyone why she was called the Voice. Not because of chart positions, not because of album sales, not because of awards, but because when Whitney Houston sang, she connected with something bigger than herself. And that night, in front of a gospel audience, she sang with her whole heart. What we can learn. Here's what breaks my heart about this story. Whitney spent her entire career trying to prove herself to the world, trying to meet impossible standards, trying to be perfect. But the moment that mattered most, the moment that would become her final televised performance, wasn't at a stadium or an award show. It was at a gospel concert singing a song about surrendering to something greater than herself, standing next to a friend who loved her not for what she could do, but for who she was. Kim Burrell later told CNN, "I entered into Whitney Elizabeth Houston's world, the person. And I think my love for God and my love for her as an individual just kind of gave me the go-ahead to do what I'm called to do. The person, not the superstar, not the icon, not the voice, the person." The song R. Kelly held for 14 years. Think about this. In 1996, R. Kelly wrote, "I look to you specifically for Whitney Houston." He tried to send it to her, but Clive Davis held on to it. For 14 years. And when Whitney finally heard it in 2008, it became the song that defined her comeback, the essence of her final album. What if she'd recorded it in 1996? Would it have meant the same thing? Would it have carried the same weight, or did that song need to wait until Whitney had been through hell and back, until she knew what it meant to truly need someone greater than herself to pull her through? Maybe some songs are meant to wait until we're ready to sing them. Final thoughts. On January 30th, 2011, BET's Celebration of Gospel aired on television. Millions of viewers watched Whitney Houston and Kim Burrell perform "I Look to You." They didn't know it was the Whitney's final televised performance. They didn't know Whitney had only 13 months left to live. They didn't know about the last voicemail Kim would receive. Whitney singing, happy, saying she couldn't wait to see her friend. They didn't know Kim would arrive at the hotel a little too late. All they knew was what they saw. Two powerful voices, two dear friends, singing about looking to something greater when everything else falls apart. And maybe that's all we need to know. Whitney Houston spent her life being the voice. But that night at the Orpheum Theater, she was just Whitney, a woman who needed to sing, a woman who needed her friend, a woman who needed to remember that no matter how far she'd fallen, there was still somewhere and someone to look to. I look to you. If this story moved you, here's what I need you to do. Hit that like button. This took hours of research to get every fact right. Subscribe and turn on notifications. We're telling Whitney's story the way it deserves to be told. With truth, with heart, with respect. Comment below. What's your favorite Whitney Houston moment? I read every single comment. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. Whitney Houston's voice may be silenced, but her story, and the people who loved her, deserve to be remembered. Thank you for watching. Rest in peace, Whitney. And thank you, Kim Burrell, for being the friend she needed.